Okay, so today I'd like to make a series of videos about the actual creating of the icon. So we've finished making the boards, and then there's a whole process of how to transfer the images onto the boards. And I've actually done retreats with Christian monks and with Tibetan monks who do thangkas, and it's quite amazing that the processes are almost identical. Even when applying the paints, in the Christian tradition, in which I'm using is the egg tempera, and the Tibetans do a very, very similar process of using raw pigments with some sort of binding agent. And so I will get into all of that. So for the demonstration of actually how to transfer an image onto the board, I was mentioning the Christian tradition and Tibetan traditions are very similar. When I did the one with the Tibetans, it was quite interesting that they actually have like these drawings of the Buddha, and you start with very simple. And it's actually like a formula. Like there'd be like a set of numbers you would remember on one side of the board and another across the bottom. And if you would draw certain lines with those numbers, then how you draw the image is everything's going to be proportional. Like the head would be here, the eyes would be there, the shoulders would be here. And so it was a very systematic way of being able to transfer an image onto a board, and you'd be just doing it through a mathematical equation. Both traditions also have done things like you'll have an image. Here's kind of the reverse image of it drawn, and so I just find these on the internet and just print them, trying to find a high enough quality so I can see the details. And I use, there's two ways of doing it. One is tracing paper. And so I would just use a print from something that I got on the internet. Again, this is Our Lady of Guadalupe, a close-up. It's actually a much larger icon, but I was just working on doing faces and hands as a project, and so there's two ways of doing it. One is there's this one here is called gray transfer paper, and what you do is you just I use them many times. You can see a lot of the transfer sketches and lines, but I still find that it still works. But you put that down on the board, make sure that the carbon, the dark black side is down, and then you just put your image on top of it. And I have tape on this because I would tape it onto the board so it doesn't move. And then just using a sharp pencil, you could use a pen as well, but then you just draw the image. The images that you want a black line, so you don't try to do shading or any extremely fine detail, but the parts that you definitely want to be shown in the icon, or to give you reference for where things are, parts of clothing or jewelry, any kind of any reference point that you want to have on your board, you draw that on the image. And I don't know if you can see here I've used this image several times. And if you look at it under certain light, you can actually see the carbon from the pencil. And one time I did this, I actually had this paper turned the wrong way. So when I did the drawing, it transferred the image onto the board, onto the paper instead of the board. But so that's kind of like the image you would get on the board. It would just be, just what I traced. And so last night, as a demo, I did do the drawing. I also, when I'm doing that, I just have a pair of reading glasses that I will wear, and I also have a little kind of what you call magnifying glass with the LED lights on it that I can put real close, and that helps quite a bit. So this was the image that I from this drawing did with the carbon paper to transfer the image on. So that's the drawing of it. There's two ways I mentioned of sort of transferring an image. The other would be with this tracing paper. So this is just from Dick Blick, and it's just a very thin paper that you can see through. And you'd almost do exactly the same. So like you would just put this over and then do the drawing onto the paper. Here's an image of Ajahn that I like painting, and I've used this one several times as an image. I'll probably paint it many more times. You trace it one time, just like the image is there. And then this is kind of interesting. I think there's actually almost something psychological about it. You flip the image over and you draw it a second time. I wouldn't draw it on top of the board, but just on a white piece of paper. You draw the image reverse. And then when you flip it over again to then center this image wherever you want it on your board, and then you draw it a third time, then that transfers your the second drawing onto the board. And I think there's something kind of neat about that. This is the way I learned from the Christian first icon workshop I did with Father Damien, was to do it with the tracing paper. And I think there's something psychological about, like, you've picked your image, you have it in your mind, you draw it one time, then you flip it over and you do a reverse image. It's almost like going deeper into your psyche or something. And then you flip it over and you draw it a third time the right way again. And then the image would be on your board. And so that's what it would look like at this point. And then I think even a deeper sort of psychological level is you take some sort of sharp object. This is, I don't even know what this was, but this was given to me at the first icon workshop I did. And it just has a really pointed end to it. And it had a handle, which the handle broke, but it actually has two kind of points. And I made this handle here out of some Hawaiian hardwood, and then I just put some tape on it to make sure it stays in there. But then I just use this as a pen. I've seen people taking 9-inch nails and sanding them down or filing them down to a really strong point, and it does hurt your fingers when you're kind of using that and trying to sketch an image. And so what I've seen people do is take string and then wrap it completely around the nail as a kind of a cushion. But and I do find it's interesting that just using this and the pressure, my hands do get pretty tired doing this part. But what I would do then is all of the lines that show up here, sometimes there's like a line, there's like 4 lines right here. I know from doing this in the past, I only want to use, say, these 2 lines. And so when I'm scratching the image, I'll just be a little more careful to only do the images that I want. And after having transferred the image, you can see here there's kind of a line right here. And so all the stuff over here I just drew with the pencil. And sometimes I'll come in, like, maybe I don't quite like the way the hand looked. Like here, there's some couple lines there that I may or may not want to. I definitely won't want to use those. So I could either, with an eraser, erase those images that I don't want, the lines that I don't want. And but then I would come in, and it does take a little bit of pressure, and it takes some effort or some time to exactly know how much pressure to use, and that just will come with experience. And so I'm actually probably going to erase this image and not do another. I'll do this one as an icon painting. I'm not sure I'll do this one, so I'm not going to scratch it right now. But it does take, here I can just do it on this one here. So there's going to be, these stars are 8-pointed, and you can probably do them extremely light, so it's just barely an etching on it. So different places, you'll see that's what happens without it having the taped in there. But probably a very light scratching onto the surface is better. I kind of like texture and lines coming through. And basically what this does is that when you start applying the paint, it can be up to 20 to 40 layers of paint underneath coming through, depending on how, well, probably in one area you might get 5 or 6 areas of layers of paint coming through, and it might be like 40 different layers throughout the whole image. But when you have the line etched, you can always see it. If you're just looking at it from a distance, or even just glancing at it, you may not see the lines. But when you're painting it, especially if you're wearing, say, reading glasses or have a magnifying glass, you can clearly see where, like, exactly where the nose is supposed to be, or exactly where the bottom of the lip is. And it's interesting that several artist friends of mine have told me that for the longest time, 5-10 years, I really just focused on hands and faces. And the reason for that is no matter how beautiful the rest of the painting is, really, if you don't do the hands and faces correctly or get the proportions right, it's not going to look real. And maybe that's the effect you want, but it's so that's where I've focused all of my attention. And so just having those lines there really can keep you dialed into what is needed. So in terms of tools for doing this, some sort of sharp object, you'll need a pencil, you'll need the transfer paper or the clear kind of sketching paper. Glasses are optional. I do find it helpful to have a really good pencil sharpener. So this has got kind of and it has a really, really fine, if you can see that you could stab somebody with that. And an eraser. And then I also have various kinds of tape, so to tape the image onto the board, so when I transfer the image, it doesn't move around. And now, usually I'll use this kind of masking tape, but you can also use sort of the clear tape as well. And I think that covers all of the processes for transferring the image onto the board. And we'll take a quick break here, and I'll come back and show the pigments and the paint brushes and all the tools that I use while I'm actually painting. So I hope this was helpful.